Hello and welcome to this episode of Talk the Talk, RTR-FM's weekly show about linguistics, the science of language. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language questions, and some great music. Maybe we'll even hear from you. My name's Daniel Midgley. I'm here with Ben Ainsley.
Good morning.
And Kylie Sturgis.
G'day, everyone.
We're taking your questions on this episode. What's happening with tildes and Facebook? Can you have a big, huge balloon, or could it be a huge, big balloon? And if you move a meeting forward, did it just get later or earlier? The answers may surprise you on this episode of Talk the Talk.
Does tilde have to be said with the accent that you just said it with?
Tilde.
Tilde.
It's a tilde. Well, that's how I learned it, because I learned what a tilde was in Spanish class, and that's what they said. So,
How does it come to us, Daniel? Can you give us a 25-second delicious little tidbit about the tilde?
I would love to. The word comes from the Latin titulus, meaning...
Tickles.
No, meaning title.
Oh.
Or superscription. People used to use it over a letter to show that there was something being abbreviated, especially if that thing was a following N.
Now, do we actually call the thing that sits above the N in the Spanish alphabet, the letter ñ, do we call that a tilde still?
Yeah, we call it a tilde.
Okay.
In time, it got used to show that something was nasalized. And this is where we have, like in French, on,
Right.
or en, or of course, in Spanish, ña. But we have a story here about a young child named Fanche.
Named what?
Fanche.
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 Right?
It's a pretty...
What happened to Fanche?
It's a pretty common name over there in Brittany. Do you know where Brittany is?
Brittany is the northern part of France, sort of next to Normandy.
Yeah.
Good cheese, that's what I know.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I would imagine the harder cheeses, probably.
Okay. Well, they also speak Breton,
Breton.
which I didn't know a lot about.
No, is this like Manx? Is it one of those super ancient white people languages?
It's like really closely related to Cornish. It's Celtic.
Right, yeah.
It's a Celtic language sitting right in the middle of, on the edge of France.
Now, like when we say sitting in the middle of, are we thinking that it's like general usage is still pretty low?
It's up there. I mean, it's a traditional language, and it's the kind of language that you might want to name a child in if you were a Breton.
Okay, so this is where we're getting some like kind of Welsh-sounding names, some Irish-sounding names.
Except the name has been knocked back in French court.
No!
Yes.
Oh, that
the
poor
French
child.
language police, right again!
Right. They're saying that young Fanche, F-A-N with a tilde, C-H, can't have that name.
Because he will be maligned by snooty French people for his entire life? Is that what they're thinking?
Because they're starting to see if they can stamp out the tilde. I mean, what?
It seems like an irrational tilde prejudice. The judge said the principle according to which babies' names are chosen by their mothers and fathers must have limits when it comes to using a spelling which includes a character unrecognized by the French language.
Oh,
Now,
ding. Like I'm seeing red flags popping up.
French, come on. You've got all kinds of weird diacritics.
You got circumflexes and all sorts of nonsense. Wait, do they have circumflexes?
They still do have
Yes,
some
Yeah,
circumflexes.
they got hats on all the words, it seems, yeah.
And this is a problem for issues of language representation because, I mean, Breton is one of the languages of France.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably older than French is.
Oh.
Them's fighting words.
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you want to come in and colonize a place full of the Gauls and then get cranky that they still want to speak Gaelic, then
Did Asterix teach us nothing?
I was about to say, you don't want to mess with the characters, that's for certain. They have a habit of, muscling up and going at you with their magic potion.
Now, things have loosened up a little bit in France over the years. If you had a baby before 1993, you had to choose from a long list of names.
so it was literally like there was an okay names list.
There was a white list.
That's fascinating. I had no idea. God, they're so normative.
Well, they would be, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They're Normans.
Yes, true.
Well, there are other names that are disallowed in French.
Okay.
Manhattan,
Interesting.
Megan.
As in Megan.
Yeah, but this was disallowed because the kid's last name was Renault,
Megan Renault.
like the car.
Oh, right.
Nutella was disallowed.
Now that's just rude.
I know.
Oh, it's such a sweet name too.
I think they finally went for Ella. And then Joyeux,
Joyeux.
well, happy.
Happy, yeah.
Is the kid like one of the 7 dwarfs or something?
Well, hang on.
I know.
Hang on.
I know.
That's not cool. Because there's plenty of people all around the world who do exactly that. Who's like Solveig in Danish is sunshine. I have 2 different friends whose names are Solveig.
I've had 2 friends from high school who both were called Gay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's also fraise, which means strawberry.
Beautiful. Love it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the judge pointed out that it could be used to taunt the child like ramène ta fraise, which means get your butt over here.
Oh.
Because strawberry is a slang term for butt.
Yeah.
Well, look, if you were going to call your kid bottom, I feel like there would be, issues.
Well,
Shakespeare notwithstanding.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the parents of Fanche have decided to fight this.
Oh,
Good for them.
Yeah, good for
I
them.
think so too.
Look, all of the reasons you gave, although I would not agree with, you can kind of see if you have a working understanding of how French culture works. You can kind of understand the logic behind it. Like the French are quite normative with especially language issues. But smacking down one of the minority languages that pre-existed before your country was a country, that's a bit rough.
Well, I, for one, am going to spell my name with a tilde in solidarity. From now on, I am Daniel. Wait, that sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
So much for that.
I am Ben.
And you can't be really anything easily because it's only A, O, and N. Well,
But I shall wave the flag for the tilde
a little tilde
regardless.
flag.
Little tilde flag.
thanks to Kieran and Sophie for those. Then, continuing with our tilde theme,
It's everywhere.
Joanna has given us a message on Facebook. Can I just rant about something for a second?
Oh, absolutely, Joanna, because you're on Facebook and there is no higher purpose.
Facebook Messenger has taken away some very useful punctuation marks that my friends and I use to denote certain tones, and it's infuriating.
Oh, no. Did someone take away the interrobang?
No, worse
okay.
than that. What happens is they use tildes on either side of words to signify sarcasm.
Oh, okay.
And they also use an odd combination of tildes and asterisks. The problem?
Oh, that's code, isn't it?
Facebook Messenger has recently introduced Markdown,
Yes.
where if you surround something, that's why I was sending you guys lots of test
But
messages.
it didn't work.
Didn't work for you?
No, I got asterisks and tildes.
Well, it worked for me, because when I put asterisks around something, it would bold it.
That's traditionally, the bolding.
Yeah, and if I put tildes on either side of it, it was strike through. Joanna continues, my friends and I are low-key furious about this because it takes away this really useful way of denoting tone, getting a joke across, or whatever. Half of our messages are now stricken through, or randomly bolded, and now we've had to come up with new ways to get across these specific tones. Is this a thing other people have encountered or noticed, or am I the only angry one about this?
2 things. First of all, low-key furious. Lol. Not possible. Second of all, I think, Joanna, that you're missing the upside, the silver lining to this situation. There you were, trucking along, minding your own business, having the lols, having the chats with your mates, and then all of a sudden, Facebook was like, "Pow! Develop some neuroplasticity." Your brain has had to be like, "Oh no, detour!" And you know what, Joanna? I think you should be saying thank you.
I guess it will help a little bit of mental flexibility. But I'm understanding this point of view because Facebook has left the markdown for so long that people have had to kind of evolve it, but they didn't do it in ways that Facebook foresaw. They did it their own ways.
Yes, it's true.
Interesting.
Go Facebook for forcing people to be like, "Oh, I can do a thing." I actually, you know what, Joanna? I like that Facebook has done this. I'm sorry. I'm putting it out there.
They should have done it a lot earlier.
Exactly.
I think they should have put it a warning at least saying, okay, we're going to be doing this, so you might want to start coming up with an alternative way.
Facebook, classically famous for keeping...
Cares about their public. Hey, let's just use your data and see what we can do with it. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
guess.
Let's just change the entire interface.
all of the things. All of the things. They'll figure it out. But you know what? Unfortunately, they are right and we are wrong. We always do. Joanna has already started doing it.
I guess so. You will do this now.
Yes, you will. Do you like talking to your grandmother in Sweden? Well, get used to markup.
Is this bothering you? As always, get your questions or comments to us, 9260-9210.
You can send us an email here in the studio, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.
Or hit us up on social media. We're active on Facebook. We are all over the Twitters. Just look for Talk RTR and Talk the Talk on Facebook.
But now let's listen to someone with a tilde in their name. It's Senor Coconut. This is a YMO cover of his called Ongaku on RTR FM 92.1.
We are doing a mailbag episode. Oh, I love these ones. They're so much fun.
They're a lot of fun because people think of great questions.
We have, in case you people out there listening are not aware, a really interesting and engaged community, mostly revolving around Facebook. So those of you who are anti-Facebook, which I totally understand.
Just look what they did to the tilde, honey.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's it. It's over.
But if you do engage with the evil empire, then you can find a wonderful island of linguistic sort of interestingness at our Facebook group. And I think for the large extent of what we get, this is where we get a lot of our stuff.
I think so too. John sent us a message on Facebook.
Hello, John.
How do y'all, he says.
Y'all do good, John.
Just listen to episode 292 again, a mailbag show where y'all talked quite a bit about accents. This got me wondering if there has been any studies on how many accents there are in the world.
Whoa.
And how many on average can a person discern?
Whoa.
I know, right?
John, that's a big question.
Scale that back, cowboy. I know here in the U.S. it's a bit difficult to tell a Southern accent from a Texas accent without hearing the grammar differences. Also, thanks for answering my question on that episode on air. Neat hearing my question from such an awesome group of folks on the other side of the planet. Thanks.
Aw, shucks. Twarn't nothing, John.
You're doing that scarily well.
I would wager, as per everyone who ever hears their own accent done to them, John currently disagrees with you.
He's probably head desking at the moment.
He's
Sorry,
big time.
John.
Sorry, John.
Well,
I will stop. That was the first and last in this particular bracket.
Let's talk about accent versus dialect.
Okay.
What's the difference?
An accent is when you say the same stuff funnier. A dialect is when you say different stuff.
Accents aren't just the funny ones. Everybody speaks with an accent.
Except me.
Even
obviously.
me.
No.
Now, I didn't have time to check into all the languages in all the world for all the accents. There are
Phoning it in.
There are 7,000 languages in the world, just about, and presumably every one of those has a few different ways of doing its thing.
You would have to imagine, wouldn't you? Except for like crazily minority languages, of which there would only be like a handful of speakers, possibly. But outside of that, every language with, I'm going to say more than like a couple of hundred would have to have accents.
Let's just focus on English for a second. I took a look at the Wikipedia page on list of dialects of the English language. It lists a couple hundred dialects.
Dialects?
Dialects.
Whoa.
Not the same as accents, but one presumes that there's at least one accent
For every dialect. Yeah, right.
Let me ask you guys a question, because this is not my area. Can you tell the difference between, say, somebody from WA and somebody from Queensland?
Not consistently. I can't, if I'm being completely honest.
I think I can. I think because I've known a few people from Queensland, so that might be an influence.
If you had to describe the difference, can you articulate what kind of sounds there are?
Particularly strong speakers of Queenslandish speak very broadly, right? They tend to have a very Australian
Very
accent.
ochre, yeah.
Okay.
But this is why I say it's inconsistent, because there's every possibility that you would run into a random resident of Brisbane or something, and they're just speaking in a standard middle Australian register with absolutely no banana bendy inflection at all.
Okay, well, this takes us to some early work by linguists Arthur Delbridge and A.G. Mitchell. They came up with 3 basic accent categories in Australia. One is the broad accent, think Steve Irwin, the general accent,
Me.
and then the cultivated accent.
Jeffrey Rush.
Yeah, good example.
I like that I put myself on a level with Steve Irwin and Jeffrey Rush.
You're right there in the middle.
You're somewhere in the middle, like a sandwich.
I thought we were charting a path down, and then we hit me, and then I was like, oh, nope, pull out of that nosedive.
So that's 3 generally accepted Australian accents.
Well, pause. Aboriginal English.
Okay, yes. So we have to take that into account. And probably some other forms as well around
I
there.
would have to imagine.
English in Australia sounds a lot of different ways.
Yes.
I'm glad you pointed that out. But the question remains, why are there so few Australian accents?
Oh, I think I know this.
Okay, go.
The reason there are substantially fewer regionally sort of cultivated accents in Australia as per America, and by extension, America as per England, of which like chalk and cheese, is because of the historical / technological development of what was going on in the world at the times that these places were colonized. So, in England, which for like a couple of millennium have been living close to each other in a society where a day's ride is probably like 20 miles. So it was very, very easy for people to live and work and die without ever going more than 20 miles from where they lived ever, right? Many regional accents.
And whenever you have people separated like that, you're going to get people talking differently, and that's how accents go.
That's totally normal. Then in America, obviously, they had maybe a century and a bit of exactly the same thing going on.
You got the people up in the mountains who are less likely to travel down to the coast and so on.
So you've got, obviously you've got the really sort of idiosyncratic mid-north accent with all of the German influence. You've got, your southern accents, maybe a bit of Texan, Appalachian, West Coast, East Coast, all that kind of stuff. The mid-Atlantic accent cultivated in the middle of the century, but they didn't get as much time before things like the locomotive and the telephone came along and allowed for this really sort of rapid exchange of ideas and information. And so that proto-development of many different regional languages kind of shut down. And then you get to the Australian example, and we basically didn't have any time at all. Australia's first colony was in 1788, and so I don't know about the telephone, but I've got to imagine probably only like 50 years-ish before trains and phones kind of balked that right out of the gate.
You're also forgetting things like the radio and Hollywood movies, and suddenly we have certain standards they put out there.
Homogenizing influence.
Yes, and you've got news broadcasts. This is the way we're expected to speak. These are particular schools who have elocution lessons for the children in order to make sure they keep up the particular standards that are expected of the school.
You guys have hit all the main points that I wanted to. I'm looking at an article.
Yay! Ben and Kylie 5. Woo! Non-linguist 5. Yeah!
I'm looking at an article from Louise Bennett from the University of Melbourne called Why Doesn't Modern Australia Have Diverse Regional Accents? And those are the main ideas. One of them is time. There just hasn't been enough time for people to be separated that much. And number two, people haven't been separated that much with technology. The Australian accent started in kind of a uniform way as opposed to America with all of its many different influences. Experts believe that it was kind of a homogenized group that started the accent. And the Australian accent was mostly started by children. And you know how children can be. They tease anybody who talks differently. So that's a really strong standardizing influence.
And it's not that old either. You can hear fairly early recordings of white Australians speaking, and geez Louise, they sound pretty bloody English to me.
And if you want to check that out, you can head to dialectsarchive.com, where they've got an entire section on various different countries, including quite a rich part on Australian accent.
There's one thing we haven't mentioned, and that's British English. That exerted quite a pull. If you listen to recordings from 50 years ago, you'll hear that they do sound
definitely prestige language. Yeah, for sure.
People always say, oh no, we're losing accents because of mass communication. Turns out that accents are pretty robust, and we don't actually see them getting lost that much.
Struth, eh?
Yeah.
God. Who'd have bloody thunk it?
I mean, sometimes we do lose one, but one will come up instead.
Yeah. And I had some concerns about a particular group who were trying to promote Australians in film, and they said, oh, what happens if we all start losing the Australian accent? And my mind immediately went, which Australian accent in particular? And I remember back, this maybe it's just one data point in my opinion. I remember when The Simpsons exploded on the scene and everyone was like, all the kiddies are going to start sounding like Bart. Oh, no. And it's, no, sorry, we didn't. And even South Park, and it's, even more filthier content didn't end up having
What about all
effect.
the Westerns, like back in the 60s, right? Surely everyone was like, well, how'd it... Oh, John, I'm sorry, no!
You're doing it again! What are you doing?
But it was contextually relevant. That's my only defense.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John, he says, without a southern accent of any kind.
Well done.
This one comes from No Forbidden Questions at NFQ blog. Hey, can you comment sometime on adjective ordering for redundant adjectives like tiny little versus little tiny? Maybe regional?
All I can think of is itsy bitsy teeny weeny. Yeah.
Hello, polka dot bikini.
Sorry.
Well, we have had that discussion a while ago about which order the adjectives come in.
That was
and
a fun game.
There,
that was.
there is definitely a learned or a understood order that just seems to work okay.
Usually the order goes something like this: number, and then quality, size, age, shape, color, purpose. So we get big, beautiful white brick houses, not beautiful white big brick houses. And even big, white, beautiful brick houses sounds a little odd.
It does. It does.
So we're talking about size. What about within the size category?
So tremendously huge.
Well, obviously that's going to go that way because adverbs like tremendously come before adjectives
Okay.
like huge.
Yeah, you're not going to get huge tremendously.
But what about
True.
big, huge? What
Big,
sounds better,
huge.
big, huge, or huge, big? How would you describe something that's also big and huge?
Big, huge seems to work better in my brain, but I can also picture a Donald Trump accent going,
Huge big wall!
yeah.
Well, it turns out huge, big sounds weird to me. But a quick check of the Ngram viewer shows it was more common until about 1980-ish. Mm-hmm. The funny thing about these compounds, like big, huge, and little, tiny, is that they swap. Tiny, little sounds better to me, but little, tiny was more popular before 1850.
How often, I've got to be honest, I don't come across redundant adjectives very often. Is this a particularly common thing? I don't encounter this much.
Not much,
Okay.
but isn't that unusual that we have feelings?
About this super fringe case.
Yeah.
Look, NFQ blog, I think you're just very safe putting your nose in the air and just being like, "Pfft," with your redundant adjectives. Doesn't matter which one sounds righter, they're both dumb and wrong.
Or wrong and dumb.
Wrong and
Or-
dumb.
Thanks to No Forbidden Questions for that one. Just to wrap up this bracket, Bob on Facebook says, yesterday was National Aboriginal Day here in Canada, but next year it will be referred to as Indigenous Peoples Day. It seems like it changed almost overnight from Aboriginal to Indigenous. Any idea why?
I'm wondering if there's a branding thing going on in Canada because you don't, or at least most of the language I've heard Canadians use around their post-colonial issues to do with First Nations people use that word, First Nations.
It's weird to me because it seems to me that in Australia, at least, it's going the other way. That we saw loads and loads of Indigenous branding in the 2000s, and now it seems to have flipped to Aboriginal, and that's more accepted now. In the Now corpus, if you look up Indigenous, just about all the references seem to point to Canadian websites.
Right.
Whereas if you look up Aboriginal, there's a mix. The Australian ones start coming in. And also, some Australian Aboriginal people feel a little sensitive about the word Indigenous because they say this is the word that was used to refer to flora and fauna. And there's a lot of sensitivity
right.
there.
But hang on, though, so was things like Aborigine. That's been around and used by awful people for many centuries.
Well, let's talk about what's okay to say and what's not.
Okay.
Aborigine, off the list.
Yes, bad.
Referring
Strike
to
through.
someone as an Aboriginal, also bad. Kylie, you've got the list. What is that from?
Okay, I've got the Style Manual of Australia, the Australian government for authors, editors, and printers.
Oh, so it's the government style manual.
Here we go.
Yeah. What it says here is that for inclusive reference, in particular in government or other types of information documents, generic terms can be ideal, provided they really represent the population in full. So Indigenous is a useful short generic reference covering all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It's a subset of the border term Australian and it's widely acceptable for this purpose. So you should always capitalise Indigenous when it refers to the original inhabitants of Australia, such as Indigenous Australians.
Well, I think the key is to look around, see what other people are writing, use a style guide if it helps you, and train yourself to notice changes just like any good linguist would.
Sold.
Thanks, Bob, for that question.
Shall we take a track?
Yeah, let's listen to Gina Williams and Guy Gauss with Baladong Wall on RTRFM 92.1.
Mailbag episode. Mailbag episode. Dot, dot.
You guys just have any opportunity to dance, I mean, really.
So let's just say that we set up a recording time for Saturday.
Okay.
And then I said, oh, can we move that forward one day?
Okay.
Did it just become
Sunday.
later or earlier?
No. Okay. It became Friday.
What?
Yep. Definitely.
Okay.
Oh.
Explain this.
Okay. So if you want to bring something forward, right, that makes it earlier. And the reason for this is that if you have, in a Western conception, a procession of time going from left to right along a line, right? If you want to move something forward, i.e. closer to the beginning of that line, then you move it to the left, which means you make it earlier.
Why did you hear that and think Sunday?
Because I thought, well, it's moving forward in time. And so my brain immediately went, oh, Sunday. I don't know why I just had this knee-jerk reaction, but that's what I thought.
Forward also... maybe Kylie's got a different spatial perception of this statement. So forward, to her perspective, might mean forward away from her, whereas forward to me means that thing is... So if you wanted to move it forward to Friday, what would you say?
I would say that I'm surprised we ever managed to find each other in the studios ever at all at this rate, because I'm just going to be sitting outside saying, yeah, I'm not moving until somebody else turns up for this goddamn show.
I guess my question is, so we've got a time set for Saturday, right?
Yep.
Same hypothetical.
Yep.
Guys, I need to move it back a day.
Okay, then it's Friday.
I have no idea.
No, you are crazy talking, Kylie. Come on. No one says, let's move it back a day. Like, in no parlance ever is it like, let's move it back a day means bring it closer to the current time.
Oh, but
you're
I'm not
moving
so
back.
sure about that.
You're moving back in the timeline.
But does it matter if I say, let's push it back a day?
Oh, then you're...
It means exactly the same thing.
Pushing it back.
No, it's gone forward a day.
No. Mm-mm.
We need to get to the email from Jane.
I need to get myself a TARDIS. That's what I need to do.
I hope that you agree with me, Jane, because I am about to get, it doesn't happen very often, but I'm about to get very Ben persnickety on this issue. Like, people who disagree with me are going to be really, really wrong.
Jane says, morning, folks. I recently got into a heated debate with my boyfriend.
Oh, Jane, I hope I'm on your side.
About the idea of moving a booking forward or back after he'd called a restaurant to move the booking forward from 5 to 7 p.m. that day.
Wrong. Oh, Jane, your boyfriend is a dummy.
According to her, this is totally back to front according to my understanding. However, the logic is that as the vector being used, time, is linear and only runs in one direction, quantum physics aside, then forward must be further along that vector. Whilst this makes some logical sense, what linguistic rules regulate our understanding and expression regarding this kind of movement? How does it vary between languages?
Well, metaphors of time are really tricky because we use multiple metaphors, right? We speak of time as moving forward, but we also perceive ourselves as moving through time,
yes,
which is moving forward while we are moving through it.
We're running on a treadmill we're on a travelator at an airport.
Yeah,
right? The travelator's moving, but we're also moving on the travelator.
Yeah. So unless you're one of those annoying people who just stand stock still with all your luggage and no one can get past
It's
you.
not a not walking machine.
Yes.
It's a get there faster machine. At least we're on the same page on this one.
Yes.
I like to walk on travelators and pretend that I'm on the moon.
Yeah, it's so good, man. Look, shall we answer Jane's question? Is there linguistic rules that govern this, Daniel?
It's not that one answer is right and the other one's wrong.
Except that mine's right, obviously.
It's which metaphor are you using? So Jane's boyfriend is using the metaphor of time moves. The event moves along a string and it can only go one way. So when you say forward, that's the way it goes. Later. And that's what we say when we say we're approaching the end of the year. Okay. Jane is using a metaphor of moving ego. Like, I am moving through time and I am describing events as they are positioned to me.
Yes.
So we say Christmas is coming, right?
Yeah.
They're both okay. They're just moving time or moving ego. Those are the two metaphors.
Well, okay, so I'm clearly in Jane's camp, and let me just say, Jane, that it's so wonderful that at least one other person in this discussion is a sensible human being.
Now, this has been tested experimentally.
Oh, yes! I love science.
Oh, okay.
But there's a really weird result. This is from Rafael Nunez, whose name has a tilde.
Go, Tilda!
And a team from the University of California, San Diego. Now, they showed subjects an animation of boxes sliding across the screen with balls moving around within the boxes.
Okay.
But then they showed other people just the boxes, just there, not sliding around at all.
Okay.
They wanted to see if whether you saw the boxes moving influenced whether you would say forward or back.
Okay.
Because the idea is if you perceive yourself as moving, then you might take that moving ego view where Christmas is coming, things get closer to me.
Yes, very much my view.
Okay. Well, then they asked people, next Wednesday's meeting has been moved forward 2 days. On what day will the meeting now take place? Or last Wednesday's meeting had been moved forward 2 days. On what day did the meeting take place? So they were doing this in the future and in the past.
So what did they find out?
They found that people who saw the moving boxes were very, very likely to say that the meeting that had been moved forward was earlier.
Yes!
Whereas if you were in the group that just saw the boxes and the boxes weren't moving, it was about 50-50.
Oh,
Wow.
Interesting.
Now, you could argue that this is because you see things moving, and so you think of yourself as moving through space, and so things that are forward are coming back toward you,
Yes.
or earlier. What they think is that people are just imagining that earlier times are in front of later times.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so-
I think both of those things are simultaneously true in my head.
So when you move the meeting forward, it's earlier. It's in front.
Yes.
It's nearer to you.
Absolutely.
Well,
Ah, that
Because
makes
I am
sense
the
now.
crunchy center of the universe.
but I do think that bring and push help things a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Here's the other thing we could do. Patricia T. O'Connor and Stuart Kellerman of the Grammarphobia blog suggest that we borrow an item from Indian English.
Oh.
Prepone. Well, you postpone a meeting.
Oh, you prepone it.
You could prepone it. If you just said one of those two words, it could be great. It could be like, could we prepone this meeting a little bit? And you know which direction it's in.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jane, for that question. And Izzy, via email, she sent us a link to an article by Violet Blue. Seems that Google has developed an API called Perspective for scoring toxicity in online discussions. So a toxic comment is
This poor AI. Oh my God. Imagine what it has to scroll through.
look, if I gotta go through it, the AI's gotta go through it. A toxic comment is a rude, disrespectful, or unreasonable comment that is likely to make you leave a discussion.
Okay.
I think we can agree comments are just the worst thing about the internet.
Yes. You cannot turn them off on Facebook.
yes.
I know.
Yeah,
I've
that is-
looked
Facebook
at
is
it.
essentially just comments.
Well, yeah, it's the worst part of the internet built just to be one part.
Except that our commenters are really, really good, and I think we're very, very lucky.
Those people are lovely.
You know what else is good? The New York Times comments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they have tons of humans pouring through and ripping out the toxic comments
right. So
as they
they're
go.
just paying.
So the idea behind Perspective is cool. So what they did was they got AIs to look at the things that the New York Times moderators ripped out.
Oh.
So we did the classic, like, what do the humans do? Let's
Yep.
try and figure that out.
That's it. The problem is that it's hard to do with just words. For example, and this is from Violet Blue, if you type in, I am a gay black woman, that's 87% toxic. I'm a black sex worker was tagged at 89% toxic. I am a porn performer, 80. When Violet Blue typed, people will die if they kill Obamacare, it got a 95% toxicity score. So I tried this. I typed in...
Oh no, did you just give it your comments as a corpus?
I did give it my comments.
No.
on the thread that you mentioned.
How toxic are you, Daniel?
If I said, you need to learn how to use good sources, that's unlikely to be perceived as toxic, 0.04.
Okay.
But if I said, you need to go back to school and learn how to use good sources, that's 0.2. That's still
What?
not very toxic.
Wow.
Whereas that was like super hostile. That's like me at my most
Yeah.
bitchy.
Yeah, it's like
Definitely.
you uneducated person. Yeah, that's what it's saying.
Slightly less toxic was this. You wouldn't know a good source if you saw one. That was like a 0.18 out of 1.
right. Because that's actually getting close to ad hominem.
That's an ad hom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slightly more ad hommy. You wouldn't know a good source if it bit you. That was 0.35.
Oh.
Still unlikely to be perceived as toxic, but it
if-
really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you wouldn't know a good source if it bit you on the ass. Finally, at this point, likely to be perceived as toxic, 0.95. The thing that I said to that one dude, your source is terrible, likely to be perceived as toxic, 0.74.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that's the not toxic one. That is literally just you going totally independent of who you are. The source that you have used is bad.
I'm toxic.
Yeah.
Izzy says, interested in hearing your guys' thoughts on this. Obviously, it sucks on its face, but Do you think there's any way for automated flagging to progress to a working level?
Yes, definitely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
But sarcasm, irony,
it's fine.
humor.
Yeah, words don't just mean things, right?
Yeah.
Words mean what the person intended them to mean in that situation. Words are all we have, right? You got the words. Those are your inputs. And yet words mean different things in different situations. The way forward here is 2 words, more data, right?
Yeah.
That's really all that there is. The more data you see, the more likely it is that you'll get an answer that's good. But this is a really tough task. Toxicity is a really slippery concept. But thanks to Izzy for that question.
Shall we take another track?
Yep, let's do Methyl Ethyl with Poison Peach on RTR-FM 92.1.
It's a mailbag episode. We've been answering heaps of questions. But Daniel, Kylie, I've got a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
What's word of the week?
Oh. The word of the week this week was suggested by Garth. It's not very nice. The word is sextortion.
Sextortion. Distortion or extortion?
Extortion.
Oh, okay.
He says, I just heard it on the 7:30 report, so I looked it up. It sounds like it's supposed to be sexy and exciting, but actually it's kind of gross. Kylie?
Yeah. If you're familiar with revenge porn, if you're familiar with people using sexting against people, then this is pretty much in the same kind of category.
Victims are persuaded to take part in sexual acts in front of a webcam, and then they're threatened with leaking it to the internet unless you pay or get more material. People have lost a lot of money from this kind of thing. There have been suicides, men, by the way.
Yeah, it's particularly egregious against children, and we've seen it with, images of famous people who've had images that they've sent to their particular loved ones. The relationship's gone bad, or a camera or a phone or material's been stolen, and then it's been put online.
Now, quick question for the 2 of you who read these sort of advices put out by these organisations. Is there a part of it that still harkens to this whole the best and most simple way to avoid these situations is don't do the thing?
Well, look, I'm glad to say that the BBC and the Cleveland Police and the FBI and others have they're all giving kind of the same advice, and it doesn't involve shaming. So here it is.
Right.
If you are in this situation and somebody is trying to blackmail you, number 1, do not panic. You are the victim. The police are taking this kind of thing seriously. You can go to them.
Oh, this is great.
Number 2, do not pay.
Yeah.
Never pay anyone. Number 3, don't communicate further with the offenders. And number 4, preserve all the evidence that you
Yes,
can.
absolutely. And that's, I think, the problem for many people out there. They think, oh, no, I trusted this person, or I didn't expect that my phone would be stolen, or somehow they got access to my data. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of, hesitation about this. People won't believe me. People will blame me. And that's the thing that you really have to watch out for.
There's a lot of shaming surrounding this issue, like you say, Kylie. And, people say, well, if you don't want nude photos to get leaked, just don't take any, which is bad for 2 reasons. Number 1, it spreads sex negativity. There are some really good reasons that you can share sexy pictures.
Yeah, it's hot. It's really fun. It's like when people just don't do drugs. Like, you understand that drugs are really fun, right? Like, people don't take them because they're the worst, most life-destroying thing in the world. There is a very significant positive benefit. Whenever people give the advice of just don't do the thing, the reason thousands upon thousands of people do a thing is not because the thing sucks, dingus.
The problem is a culture of disrespect and contempt where people don't take consent seriously. And we need to lay the blame on the perpetrators, not the people taking the pictures. Because if we shame people for taking the pictures, shame is what causes people not to go to the police in the first place. That's a real problem.
Yes. I think you should be entitled to send your naked body to a person in digital form and have a reasonable expectation that the social norm is that that person does not send that to anyone else without your express permission.
I would probably put provisos on that. Sending photos of myself, if I know that the recipient is okay with it, I'm not going to just throw my junk out there to any.
I trust a trusted social contact.
Let's boost issues of consent and let's put the blame on the perpetrators where it belongs. What should we call the marriage equality vote? I've got a friend who's calling it a fake vote or a fote.
No, don't like fote.
Okay.
Sorry, Daniel's friend.
Do you like plebiscite?
Ooh.
Flabby site. I mean, it's got to be done, but and I certainly support the opportunity for people to have a say, but how much of this is actually going to change politicians' minds is something that I'm concerned about.
People have been receiving their marriage equality surveys. Please get them in, folks. You know what you're like. Get them in as soon as you can.
Yes, I have mine sitting on my bench unopened still.
Well,
Whereas I ran straight inside, got it all ticked.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went straight out to the post box and even took a photo, which immediately had some people going, oh, who cares about your opinion? And no, sorry, it matters.
finally, email bankruptcy.
Email bankruptcy.
When
Or
you-
like, are we post-email? Is that what we're talking about?
No, it's when
okay.
you've got 100 emails lined up and you've got them in different strata. And the top strata is the stuff that's new that you intend to get to. The middle strata is you've had a look at it, but it's just too hard. And then you've got this bedrock that you'll never get to. Is this familiar?
I love the idea that there's anyone in the world who doesn't do what I do, which is just have an inbox with, at last count, 1,800 unread messages. I just let it all pile up because every email in the world now has a search bar. Why would I need to organize anything?
Oh, yeah. No, that's true. But that's how I do my inbox. I just have a massive folder called stuff.
Yeah, my it's just my stuff folder is called inbox.
Oh, I see. Do you ever get to those messages or do anything with them?
I don't know, Daniel. Do I tend to get back to you on a regular basis?
You do okay with me.
Oh, do I?
You're all right. But what you can do is declare email bankruptcy.
And just
You say, everyone, I have declared email bankruptcy. If I haven't gotten your message,
if you have not heard from me regarding the thing, it's gone.
you're
now.
not gonna. If it's really important, send it again.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't declared email bankruptcy, then congratulations. You're staying on top of things mostly.
If you're anything like me, you have just externalized your email bankruptcy like debt load to Gmail's search function.
You should really kind of declare it.
And if you're like me, people have to check the Instagram that you've got in order to figure out where the hell is Kylie today?
Well, we've got email bankruptcy. We've got the Flebicite, which I am a fan of. Much better
Flabby side.
than Vote.
Or, according to the folks at Honest Government, a plebby-shite. Because it's plebby and it's shite.
It is.
Plebiscite or sextortion. Look, I'm going to give it to sextortion this week. That's my vote, not because of any reason other than the fact that it is probably the most significant social issue. The plebiscite, I feel like, is kind of going to be resolving itself, more or less, whereas sextortion is a very sticky problem that I think we still don't have a very good handle on. So let's try and up that notoriety a little bit.
Thanks, Ben.
I'm going to get out of here. Daniel and Kylie are going to stick around. If all of our questions have provoked yet more questions from you, you can get in touch via the telephone, 9260-9210.
A nice email would be lovely. talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au.
Jump onto social media. Our Facebook page is buzzing and Talk RTR on Twitter. Hey, we're on Instagram. We're on social media everywhere. Check us out.
But now let's listen to Coinbanks with Hatches on RTRFM 92.1.
Bye-bye.
Coinbanks there with Hatches featuring Adam Like and Taku. I was feeling that track.
That was awesome.
Today is International Talk Like a Pirate Day. Kylie, do you give a crap?
No.
On we go. Andrew says, on the subject of tildes, WhatsApp does it too.
Oh.
Facebook owned. I think that's probably what happened. They acquired WhatsApp and then acquired all their markdown code.
Oh.
He says, I just use a space for no strike through. So he goes tilde, space, and then whatever, and then space tilde. That avoids the markdown code.
We have a solution. Thank you.
Nico says, social meaning is so language specific that it seems to me that some distinctions are completely lost in translation. For instance, when watching something in Italian with my partner, I feel like I have to explain that the characters are referring to each other as lei instead of tu. You know, like the familiar form of you versus the distant form of you.
Yeah.
Because the formality is central to the plot. And maybe later they switch to two forms, and I have to point that out. So here comes the question, because I've always wondered, are there any tricks that translators can use to render these distinctions into English?
Okay, now this is something we're probably going to have to see if we can get a translator for, but it is so difficult to translate films. You've got symbolism, you've got illusion, there might be a change of register or a mood. And as you mentioned, the historical period. For example, if you're translating the film version of On the Wings of a Dove and comparing it to Quadrophenia, for example, completely different eras, completely different styles, even just in England, let alone other countries out there.
Tricky stuff.
It's tricky stuff. So if you are a translator out there and love to tell us some of the tricks of the trade, please do. But yeah, I know what you mean. It is a tremendous challenge to get it right.
I found two things. One is that some translators just go ahead and use the equivalents in English. What, you say? There is no equivalent in English. Yes, there is. There's thou and you. So they sometimes throw that in.
But it might be a bit weird if you're watching Quadrophenia and suddenly Sting going, thou and you.
Yeah, that is odd. So one story comes to us from the blog Language Hat. This will be on our blog, talkthetalkpodcast.com.
Okay, cool.
In Orlando, one of the characters suddenly switches from the formal vous to the informal tu in French.
Yeah.
This is a crucial moment in the narrative. The speaker is a prissy bourgeois woman of 35. She's addressing a young man with whom she entertains a somewhat ambiguous relationship. For the francophone reader, this unwitting switch from vous to tu signals an important shift in the woman's feelings.
Of course, yeah.
So how did the translator handle it? By having her put a hand on his arm. Bridging the distance.
Of course.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Maybe even calling somebody by a certain name.
Sweetie, darling, darling, sweetie. Yes.
Instead, calling them by their first name. Interesting there. So Jerry, do I have time for this one? Jerry says, how different do you think Grice's maxims and the cooperative principle would be if they were established in this era? Darn, you know what? This is a question I don't have time for, so I think this is one I'm going to have to roll over to the next one.
But we love these questions, so yeah, keep sending them in.
We do. Also, I'm going to roll over Mike's question about language policing because he's been having thoughts about, the conflict between not judging people's language, but also, what happens if people spell things differently and then kids think that that's the way to do it.
And advertising. It's all such a big question.
All right. Well, we got a couple to roll over here. Hey, there's something that you shouldn't roll over, and that is your Radiothon pledge. We were so gratified by so many people donating and pledging for RTR-FM's Radiothon, but now we need you to do something. While you're putting that marriage equality plebiscite thing in the mail, we need you to head over to the RTR-FM webpage and make good your pledge. Otherwise, it doesn't really help.
You can even do it in person. Come on into the office. Do it. Pay your pledge. Show the love.
Mark Neal is going to be taking us out to lunch. But until next week, keep talking.
This has been an RTR-FM podcast. RTR-FM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
Our theme song is by R Trees, and you can check out their music on rtrees.com and everywhere good music is sold.
We're on Twitter at TalkRTR. Send us an email, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And if you'd like to get lots of extra linguistic goodies, then like us on Facebook or check out our Patreon page. You can always find out whatever we're up to by heading to talkthetalkpodcast.com.